Introducing Nazareth Castellanos. I know her since many years already. Nazareth studied physics in the University Autónoma de Madrid, and then she got she did a master in computational neuroscience, and after that she got a PhD degree in medicine, in neuroscience at the Autónoma de Madrid, working with Valerie Makarov and Carlos Abandania. She spent several postdoc positions, short and long, some of them in the University, in the Instituto for Tecnología de Technologies, with Fernando Maestro, some of you know him. She was also a visitor at the Fraunhofer Institute for Mathematics in Berlin, supervised by Guido Nolte. Then she was at the Max Planck for Brain Research with Bob Singer, also some months, and Raúl Vicente was also there at that time. She was also at the King College of London in the Institute of Psychiatry for almost 1 year. She is Director of Research and co-founder of Nirakara Lab, which is a cátedra of mindfulness and cognitive sciences from the Complejos de Madrid since October 2015. She is also Associate Researcher of the Laboratory of Cognitive Neuroscience and Computation at the Centro de Tecnología Biomédica de Madrid. And she's interested, as she will tell us about today, is mainly now the brain-body interaction, but she has also been working in brain aspects related to consequence of hyperconnectivity in the brain, networks, and the organization of cognitive patterns. So, Natha, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here because this is my first scientific talk in Mallorca, where I moved 6 months ago for personal reasons, and I am very, very happy to live here because it's a wonderful place, and I'm very, very thanks to Professor Claudio Mirazo because I know him since many times. We agree in different aspects of neuroscience. We have to develop models, and thank you very, very much for treating me so well here. And today I would like to introduce you one of the last projects I was working on, and this is related to the complex body network. As you know, very recently in neuroscience, I am very happy because we are like living a kind of revolution because like just very few years back, we thought that only brain is taking part of cognition, emotions, or such a subjective experience like this consciousness. But the last years, there was many revolutionary papers showing that the brain needs to interact with the rest of the organs, like for example the heart, the gut, and breathing system. No? This is a very, very novel concept in neuroscience. Also, I think the last week I was reading an editorial in Nature saying we have to rethink the need of neuroscience because now cognitive neuroscience is not only involving brain. We have to speak like a body neuroscience or something like that, because the evidence are very, very robust, and it's very fascinating that our brain needs to integrate all the information coming from the rest of the organs, but not only from inside. Our body posture also influences cognition. Now, there are many papers showing that depending on how we have our brains, our attention and memory modulates in a different way. So this is very, very important for very different point of view. Imagine for philosophy of psychology, what are the implications for philosophy of mind, for lifestyle? Because if gut is interacting with the brain, what happens with our diet? No? See, if our body posture interacts with our cognition, so we have to increase our introspection, proprioception, that is the name, and we have to take care of our body, our lifestyle. But it's also very, very important for a medical point of view, because you cannot imagine the clinical implications that everything has. For example, I was working with Fernando Maestro in Madrid in the Alzheimer project for 15 years, and we only focused on the brain. We have to find what are the differences in the brain, where are the biomarkers in the brain to see if this person will develop Alzheimer or not. But now we have to check everything. No? Fernando Maestro, when we discussed with him, he said, oh, you are very happy, Natha, because now it's the brain, but it's a chaos, it's a chaos. If the brain is very difficult, imagine if now we have to consider the brain, the gut, the brain, the head, everything together. No? Even Harvard showed last month that the way we work can predict if we will develop Alzheimer or not. So imagine, the framework is very, 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 very complex. It's very interesting for all these disciplines, but sometimes something that I miss is that together with the developing of this very, very complex project, that, for example, Alex told me just a few minutes ago that in UCL in London they are developing the same kind of projects. But together, I think we have to develop also very complex mathematical methods to study this. Because sometimes I'm very surprised when I read papers showing that the gut interacts with brain, for example. No? And the mathematics behind this analysis is just a linear correlation. And it's a pity because I think with more complex models as the ones you develop here, we can extract much more values information. And also because we are considering, as I say here, that our body is a very, very complex network. So we should develop mathematics methods to study this project. And this is why I am here today, because I would like you to collaborate in this project, to listen your suggestions, to see how we can put the hands in this type of data that, as I tell you, is very, very complex. I will introduce you today the project that we just developed in Madrid, the framework behind, and I will show you some preliminary results of what we did. But what I wanted to send you, this is a message for you, is that we have a lot of data that we already didn't start to analyze, and I am here in Mallorca to work to develop this analysis, and I will be very, very happy to collaborate with all of you. The main topic of the main interest that we have in this project is called the embodied cognition. We wanted to study the visceral mechanisms of attention, control of attention, and emotional regulation. As I told you before, Professor Mirazo will tell you about my trajectory, but when I was back in Spain after London, I started to work, to do research in a mindfulness institute. In this institute where they teach meditation, they have a special interest in developing their research. And why? Because when we are speaking about meditation, we are speaking about the control of attention, the control of the regulation of the emotions, and also the concept of the self, who I am, what is happening with me, how I can observe my own mind. Today we are collaborating with Giulio Tononi and Professor Tang in Texas, because they have a big project there in US about the neural correlates of consciousness. But what we want to do is the proposal in this project that we are developing in Madrid is to study the body correlates of consciousness, how consciousness takes place in all the body. And here it's also important to study what happened with people that has practice of meditation or not. And the main objective of the project is the development of a physiological model of the embodied mind by means of studying the interaction between brain dynamics, cardiac, respiratory, and intestinal function. Just very, very recently, everything about the embodied cognition was done from the philosophical and psychological point of view. But it's now, just very, very few years back, when we start to measure what is happening with the magnetic electric fields in the body and how they interact. We have the first empirical evidences about this relation with the brain, with the body. Here we have the four hypotheses or the four topics that we wanted to develop. How brain interacts with heart, how brain interacts with our gut, how brains influence with the breathing interaction, and also, and this is very important and most difficult, all of them together. I don't think that it's more important the brain, or the heart is more important, or the gut is our second brain, or all these names that we listen today. I think that the important thing is the interaction between all of them. Well, we have, I think, from a complex network point of view, we have hubs. We have points that are more important, more relevant than others. But the important thing is the network per se. And this is what we wanted to develop a body network. Not only, yes, okay, that the brain listens my heart, the brain listens to my gut, pairwise. I think that the important and most beautiful thing is that we are such a complex process. On what were our hypotheses based? Because imagine when we started to speak about these projects in the university 5 years back in Madrid, the first time I meet Professor Maestro, the professor here, the director of lab, and say, I would like to develop a neuroscience project, but I want to put electrodes in the heart, in the gut, in the breathing, and also I want to measure the microbiome. We have to ask for people for the fecal content. And you can imagine the face of Fernando that you are crazy, or what happened to you in London? What it means? It's nothing to see the brain with the fecal content, that you are absolutely crazy. And I think this is very, very important, just to show you the relevance and the speed that science can have sometimes. 5 years ago, it was crazy. It was a crazy idea. So we have to write a lot of proposals to the university and see a lot of surprised faces, because people say, well, you have nothing and there is no previous results. On what are you based it on to say that's a crazy idea? But today it's more than recognized that, for example, our gut, our microbiome, all the bacteria that we have in our intestine interact with the brain. But just listen to me, that 5 years ago was absolutely crazy. But today, for example, we have papers published in Nature, Neuroscience, and the most prestigious journals, and take echo of these results that was very, very important. One of our previous results, because I told you when I proposed this to the university, they said, okay, you have to do first a very short experiment before running such an ambitious project that you want to do. You say that this is not a very, very crazy idea. So we started with studying the influence, the relation between the brain and the heart. As I told you, I was working in the CTV with Fernando Maestro in an Alzheimer project for 15 years. So we had many MEG data coming from people in different stages of dementia. You know that MEG is a system that measures the magnetic fields of the brain. It's a system that allows you to have a very, very good temporal resolution. We can have the dynamics of the brain 1,000 times per second. Also then with some mathematical methods and short reconstructions, I don't know if you are familiar with or not, we can have also good spatial resolution. And then with in Alzheimer project, what we wanted to see, what are the difference between the brain of a people who is a control person, a people who is at the beginning of the development of Alzheimer disease, that is called mild cognitive impairment. And also a key question in this project is how I can predict if this person will develop Alzheimer or not. Because when people is at the beginning of the Alzheimer disease, in mild cognitive impairment, they can evolve to Alzheimer or not. Sometimes we have a stable progression of people that is not evolved to Alzheimer disease. One of the key questions in research is how I can know the biomarkers telling me that this person will evolve to Alzheimer or not. So we have many MEG recordings from people with the first in the first stage of dementia. So what we did is to study how the brain responds to the brain pulse. And we did this without running new experiments because normally in neuroscience the heart is considered as an artifact. So we know the heart information, we have the heart signal, but we use it to remove the influence of the heart on the brain. So, taking advantage of this, I have to say that my first paper was how to remove the heart from the brain, and now I want to put back the heart there. So, in this experiment, without running new experiments, it was free. I said, okay, you can do whatever you want because it's free, analyze the data. We have the signals of the brain, 300 signals of the brain, and also we have the brain pulse. So we know every time that our heart emits a pulse. And what we did here is to study the heart evoked potentials. How our brain, our neural activity, in this case is not neural because we are working in humans, we are speaking about brain areas, but how the neural activity statistically changes his behaviors, the dynamics when the heart has a pulse. And what we found is comparing controls and people in mind cognitive environment is that people with dementia, the first state of dementia, has an interruption in the heart-brain communication. So people in the first state of dementia has lower neural heart evoked potential. It happens in different areas, as for example, in cingulate area, in precuneus, and also in some frontal areas. It was very important because sometimes at the beginning, when this heart-brain interaction was not recognized, what people say is, okay, brain has to know what the heart is doing, but it doesn't mean that the heart influences brain dynamics. Okay, it happened in somatosensory areas, the areas where the brain has to listen what is the body doing. But the surprising thing is that the heart influences also, for example, prefrontal areas. These prefrontal areas is supposed not to have relation with cognition. And we tested how these areas, how the influence of the heart on the activity of these areas correlate with different cognitive tests. Verbal fluency, different tasks of memory, of attention, tasks especially deficient in people with mild cognitive impairment. And what we saw is that the less communication between the heart and the brain we have, the less performance in these cognitive areas, especially in areas in the default mode network. But as I told you, one of the important things in Alzheimer is to predict if people will evolve to Alzheimer or not once they are in this mild cognitive environment. So in this project, we were very, very lucky because it's a longitudinal project where they measure people when they are in this stage, in mild cognitive impairment, and they scan it again 5 years later. So we could know here in the first moment we scanned people if they will evolve or not, because it's a longitudinal project. What we did is we tried to respond to the question. If we consider brain and heart, we can predict evolution of Alzheimer's disease more than if we consider only the brain. And we did this with support vector machines, and our results show that when we consider both information, heart and brain, the accuracy of the discrimination, the prediction of evolution to Alzheimer's disease increased considerably when comparing only to the brain. So for us, what we wanted to see here, to focus here is that we can improve the prediction to evolution to Alzheimer's disease, but also the main message was we have to consider also the heart, not only the brain, in a cognitive neuroscience project. If we consider heart and the brain, our variability, our uncertainty decrease. No? This, I think, this is something that we wanted to say. We have to include heart in a cognitive neuroscience project. If you have any question, you can interrupt me in a moment.
We will.
You will, okay. Okay, after this paper, okay, we could say that, okay, we have proved that the heart interacts with the brain. And but we also wanted to see not only how the brain interacts with the head. We wanted to see, and especially was very interesting for me, what is happening with different areas of our gut. What is happening with the stomach, with the intestine. And what we did here is just to we introduce people. I will show you later some photos. We introduce people in the MEG, and we have the MEG that is measuring the magnetic fields of the brain. We put some electrodes in the head, and we put a lot of electrodes in the gut. Here we measure the magnetic field, and here we measure the electric field, because we have a system to measure the magnetic field of the head and gut, but it exists. And here we wanted to see that only in different mental states over electricity of the gut, for example, and also in the head change. And what we did here is we introduce a person in the system and say this person to stay in a resting state for a few minutes, just doing nothing, and you know that there is a lot of activity. Then to introduce some, try to relax himself, no? But to see only mentally, not with movement, and then to pay attention to the brain. Different cognitive and emotional tasks. And what we see, we measure the complexity of the signal. This is like a time frequency representation, but what we are representing here is the complexity. We are using self-mutual information. And it was just a very preliminary proof. We didn't analyze more, but we saw that the pattern changed only with different mental states. So for us it was like a proof to say our body, all the body changed in cognition, in emotion, in different mental states. Then, as I told you, we are interested in different aspects of the body, not only brain and the electric components of our organs. Also, we wanted to see...
one question. What was the difference between resting state and relax?
Yeah.
On the last slide.
You don't do meditation. Resting state, if I tell you, do nothing. And stay there. Normally when we perform an experiment, you prepare the person and say, just wait until I do something. It's like the basal activity that we use to compare when people are doing something. Resting state is like in neuroscience is known like the forward network. When you are doing nothing, your brain is doing many things, but they are doing a lot of intrinsic activity. We have a lot of planification, a lot of memories, self-dialogue, self-imagination, and it's very narrative, very autobiographic information. But you have the experience that you are doing nothing, because this is a very fluctuant and spontaneous activity. You don't remember what you were thinking about, because there are a current. William James said that it was the wild river, he said, no? Because you are a bit like dreaming, but you are awake. This is very known in neuroscience, that is the Falmouth network. What we are doing when we are doing nothing. When you are relaxing, you try to reduce this inner activity. Okay, for example, you relax when you slow down your breathing. For example, you try to reduce your thinkings, your sensations, your emotions. There are many different techniques to relax, and the most common is to slow down breathing. And your brain activity reduces. Okay, this is what we normally experience. And then breathing attention is just you focus your attention in something, and especially normally we focus our attention in the sensations that you have when you are breathing. Just to focus the attention in one part. But for example, this is something that normally people, when they come to the experiment, say, what a silly, stupid task to take attention to hear. Not that you know that is very common in meditation. But if you consider our somatosensory cortex, you know that our hands have a huge representation in our brain. Our back is much lower than our hands, but our face is what is more represented in the brain, and especially this part. Okay, so this is something that is subtle. We have not a conscious experience of the sensations that we are having now that we are ready. But our brain amplifies this information. So this area is very, very represented. So to study how we pay attention to this feeling is also study the organization of the somatosensory cortex and the mechanisms of attention, because it's very difficult to pay attention to this. No? But resting state is just do nothing, and when you are doing nothing, that were many things. What is active in your brain is the default mode network. The default mode network is very important in neuroscience because it has a lot of clinical implications. For example, in Alzheimer disease, but also speak about how your brain has a predisposition to do a task. Has many implications. And then relaxes, try to reduce these thinking, these emotions. For example, slowing down your attention or thinking in feeling the sensations coming from your body. Different relaxing tasks. And for example, there is a very interesting study from Harvard University that the title of that paper was Mind Over Matter. Well, was very surprising. That what they saw in that paper is that if we use a relaxing technique, whatever, you want your peripheral response to a stress change. And it was in 2012. But until now, we thought that the peripheral response, the body response to the stress, for example, the skill constants or how your heart rate increase, we thought that it couldn't change. I cannot control this because it's outside our consciousness, it's not under control. But they saw that in different states of experience of stress, people that know how to regulate the stress, they know how to relax, the body response changes. Why? Because there is a connection also coming frontal-limbic connection, okay? Top down and not only bottom up. Mm-hmm. It was a very important topic, but your question is very interesting. Sometimes I'm very sorry, maybe you are not from neuroscience field, and sometimes I suppose that you know some terms, but thank you very much for telling me. As I told you, we were interested in the brain, in the heart, in the gut, in the brain, but from a physiological point of view, measuring the electric components of these organs. But also, you know that in the literature, if there is something that is absolutely affected and recognized in this brain-body interaction is the influence of our microbiome on the brain. The gut-brain axis is here. The last week there was a paper in Nature showing that how microbiome modulates neural behavior and fear and emotions. But there are a lot of literature. And this is very important because, for example, now with Fernando Maestro in the CTV, we are working in Alzheimer disease, and lucky me, after 5 years, Fernando is starting to ask the fecal content to the participant and the relatives, because we can measure the neurotransmitters, and there are many evidences showing that if we change our diet at the beginning of the development of Alzheimer's disease, we can change the evolution of the disease. So the clinical implications are here. And here we started to collaborate with Universidad Europea of Madrid, when there is two women that study how the microbiome reorganizes with the lifestyle. The lifestyle here is measured with if people is sedentary or active, they include some exercise in the life, and also the diet. How healthy is the diet that they have? And in this case, they had this information. I ran the analysis from the network point of view. And what we found is we estimate the competition and cooperation networks of the microbiome in people, in active people and sedentary people. And we compare this network. We saw that the complexity, the diversity of sedentary network were reduced, and we computed the ratio between competition and mutualism to see that when people is sedentary, this ratio is linked. Mutualist and competition network are coupled, and this produces a decrease in the redundancy. It correlates with different, it correlates with different measures of complexity, of diversity of the microbiome. We see, for example, when we correlate the cohesion, that is a measure of the complexity, that is the projection of the network and the abundance of the microbiome. The mutualist cohesion and the competitive cohesion only correlate in sedentary people. And sedentary people had is a loss of competitiveness in these subjects, no? Which was also very important and was a preliminary study, a way to train ourselves how to analyze a microbiome network, because in the subject, the project I will explain you now, that we also ask people for the fecal content to see how are the network, because we wanted to develop such a complex network, including brain, heart, gut, and brain, and also to compare how this network is comparable to the networks of our microbiome. Is, for example, this microbiome network correlated with the default mode network we have in our brain? This is one of the questions we want to respond.
How do you consider whether two microbes are mutualistic or complex?
Yeah, we computed the Spearman correlation, and we just split on negative and positive correlations. It was very simple. The abundance, exactly, the abundance. And then we correlate, we computed the cohesion, that is the projection on the abundance. Yeah. We try different ways of estimate correlation. Not only in Pearson, Spearman, by Curtis, mutual information. The best for us in our database was Spearman correlation.
When you define the network, I don't understand very well. You have microbials there. How do you define the network? What is the network there?
Okay, we have microbiome. We have a list, an array of microbiomes per person. Okay, so then we compute the core, because you have, you know that now microbiome is considered like your digital signal. I don't know to say in English. No? So you have a lot of bacteria, but we have a group. So I computed the core, that means the bacteria that are present in the 75% of the people, for one group and another group, and then there are exclusive bacteria. And then, with all these common bacteria in my group, I compute the correlation.
But every kind of bacteria is a node in a network?
Exactly, sorry, exactly. Here, sorry, we have 47 nodes that are 47 bacteria. Sorry, the same in us and sedentary people, yes. And the links, the links are the correlation between the positive or negative. Okay, and then we computed the clustering, the shortest path length, and all the topological analysis to see what's happening with the hubs, what are the most important bacteria in this network, and how they reorganize, if the hubs are the same in this population or the other, and how the hubs are related, for example, to the diet contents. It was related with the amount of fever that people have, and also because the exercise that they do in the life was measured as the different kinetics measured, and we correlate how the abundance of these hubs is correlated with the amount of exercise. There was a lot of questions.
This was that stable between individuals.
Yeah, exactly. This is a group network.
So this is average network of individuals.
Yeah, because it's not like, for example, in Egypt that we have temporal information. Here we have the abundance of these bacteria in just one. Sometimes in other papers they measure the abundance of bacteria in several days, for example, once a week. And here they can compute the network of this individual. But when you have just one time point, you can only do the network of the group, which is important. And what happened, I told you that I was showing you different preliminary results about the heart and the brain, the gut and the brain, And what is the relation, or why we thought that the brain interacts with breathing? Here is surprising that there is very, very few scientific papers speaking about the influence of the breathing on the brain. No? But as I told you, I was working in a meditation center, and for yoga teachers, a meditation teacher, the influence of the breathing on the mental state was absolutely obvious. But when they speak to me, I say, well, it's obvious for you, but in science there is nothing, practically nothing. No? And this is why we wanted to introduce. But there is a very, very nice paper published in Science just 2 years back. No? This is what surprised to them, no? When I speak with this yoga teacher, I said, only 2 years back you recognize that breathing is altering your brain function. But in this paper in Science, they published the results showing that this Botzinger complex that is here in the brain state modulates locus coeruleus activity. Locus coeruleus activity is the brain area who takes responsibility of how is your brain. But the interesting thing in this paper is that they saw that this locus coeruleus, a Botzinger complex, directly modulates prefrontal cortex, affecting not only olfactory processing, that you know that is very related to emotional processing, no? But it's also affecting directly attention and memory, and how is the subjective experience that we have. So in this theory, no, you can see that there is a direct evidence between breathing and attention and emotion and memory. There are, after this paper, there appear different works showing that, for example, how is different the memory encoding that we have in our hippocampus, no? This brain area most relevant for memory. What is the difference when we are inspiring or expiring? And the difference if we breathe for the nasal or from the mouth is very, very different. For example, when we are breathing nasally, we are increasing our memory capabilities and our attention. So, and this is one of the anatomical explanation that we have in science. Just very, very, very recently, in December last year, Nature Neuroscience Reviews published a paper saying breathing matters. So we have to include breathing and study how breathing modulates cognition and emotion. And what are the mechanisms underlying this influence on cognition and emotion by a neural network mechanism? Breathing is affecting not only locus coeruleus, which is an area and directly affects prefrontal cortex. Breathing is affecting a very complex network in our brain. And this is why our attention and our memory increase depending on our breathing pattern. So there was many evidence, very, very recent, that you can see that also is very, very important to study the breathing. And I think also what I like from these studies is that it's speaking increasing the knowledge we have about our body, our cognitive system. But it's also important because I think it's telling us a lot of things that we can use in our everyday, in our daily life. How I can breathe. What is happening if, for example, I am in a talk and I fall asleep? For just breath, no, and you increase your attention capabilities. No, that's a suggestion from one of you. So it's important. It's important for cognition. Diet is important for cognition. Breathing is important. Cardiovascular health is very important. For example, you know that all the cardiovascular risk components are the same as the cognitive risk, dementia risk components. So they said they are practically the same. They are, for example, in Karolinska Institute, they are studying how this cardiovascular health is affecting the neurodegenerative disease that we have. So we have to take care, we have to consider what we are doing with our body. So now I will start after this preliminary, very wide introduction. I will explain you now what we did. What was this embodied cognition experiment that we ran. In this very ambitious, as you say, project is Universidad Complutense, Nirakara Lab, the CTV, and the BTI. The BTI is a biotechnology institute that is in Vitoria. Also is now included Universidad de La Laguna with Ernesto Pereira, and I was in a conference in June last year, and now we start with collaborating with Sarah Lazar from Harvard, and I hope that in very few weeks I can put here Universidad de Islas Baleares, Palma de Mallorca, and we organize, because we have to organize a conference the next year, funded by the Complutense, and we have to think where we organize, and I think Mallorca will be a perfect place, no? Professor Mirazo, to organize a conference here. So, as I told you, I want just to tell you that when we started to run it, we have the permissions from the university to run this project, that they trust us and say, okay, brain is interacting with body, you can run this experiment. We send mails around, and in 3 months we have more than 600 volunteers to come to the experiment. We were very surprised and very happy. And also because I normally teach about neuroscience in different courses for our general public, not only in universities. And I'm very happy to see that people is very interested in these topics, because as I told you before, it's speaking about us, about our lifestyle. You know? And so we had more than 600 volunteers, and we had to select it only for economical reason 70 participants. So we have 70 people that come to the university to perform this task. They fill a very ambitious meditation practice questionnaires. We know everything about their lifestyle, and also we are running now the microbiome. We are asking for the fecal content. This is the Centro de Tecnología Biomédica, where the MEG is. I think Claudio knows very well. It's a place where we run the experiments. So this is the MEG. The MEG is measuring, as I told you, the magnetic fields of the brain. We have 306 points, so we can have a very good spatial resolution about the brain areas to see where the activity comes from, and we have the best advantage of this system, as comparing with fMRI, for example, is that we have a very good temporal resolution. We can have the dynamics, no? 1,000 times per second. People has to be in supine position. Why? Because normally in an MEG experiment, people are sit down and they have a screen here and they can do some different tasks. But as we had electrodes in the gut, they have to be in supine. Why? Because when they are seated, they can move. And they move, they destroy the electrodes. So they go in supine position. We have different 7, in this case, electrodes in the standard position to measure the electrocardiogram, to see how is the cardiac dynamic. It's important for us to measure when the heart pulse take place, but not only when, to see the heart rate. We want to know also the morphology of the cardiac dynamics. Why? Because there is a T wave that is very important. It's the cognitive part of the cardiac dynamic, and this happened around 200 milliseconds after the heart pulse. So we have this 7 position, a standard position of the electrocardiogram to measure simultaneously to the brain. Gut. How we measure the gut? There is a system that I didn't know until 5 years, that is the electrogastogram. The electrogastogram measures the electric fields of the gut. We have in this case 17 electrodes to measure. Then, as the same as we do with the brain, we can reconstruct. We go to the inverse problems and to see where this information, this electric field, comes from in the gut. Here, normally we place the electrodes where people were placed in supine position, here in the MEG. But in this case, with this girl, when we were running in the middle of the experiment, he said, I want to go to the toilet. And don't worry, it's not a problem. And after a stress for all of us, we say, okay, now you want to go to the toilet, but I will take a photo of you, and you will be in all the conferences. Why? Because inside the MEG we cannot make photos, because nothing can go inside the MEG for magnetic reasons. No? And you see, we have, the MEG is measuring the brain, then we have the activity of the eye, the activity of the heart, and a lot of electrode here. No? It's like a very surprising photo, no, for us. And people were like that. This is the MEG, that is like an elephant, no? Where people is inside, we are measuring the magnetic field of the brains and all the peripheral electrodes. One of the problems that we have is that this system is very, very sensitive. We are measuring the magnetic fields of the brain, and we are speaking about femtoteslas. It's a very, very, very weak signal. It means that we cannot, for example, if you go inside the surgery room with a mobile, you can destroy absolutely the system. It was a problem for us because when we were designing how to measure the peripheral system, we cannot include nothing with a battery, nothing with electrical component, because otherwise we cannot measure the magnetic field. Here, you know that we use it, no, this system, that this is what we use normally for the EEG. You know that in this system, we can measure the magnetic fields and simultaneously we can measure the electric field. So we have the possibility to include electrodes supposed to come from the brain. But we use this system to measure the peripheral electrodes. So we say to the system, no, this is not frontal, this is gut, this is not frontal, this is head, whatever. So they were the only way to do it. And the most important problem for us is how to measure breathing. No, because breathing we cannot measure the electric components here because there is nothing. What we do, and it was developed in the Biotechnological Institute in Vitoria, that they developed a system to measure the air pressure. Okay, but the important thing is that it has included no battery, so you cannot imagine what we have to do to design something that are very long but not enough long to decrease the pressure that we measure. We have to remove the wall, but it was absolutely a chaos, but finally we could do it. And it is very important because we have binasal information. You know that our breathing is not symmetrical. We are not having the same air pressure for one fossa, I don't know in English, from one nasal to another. It's asymmetrical. The asymmetry that we have is correlated with the interhemispherical connection in our brain. So it was very important to see what is happening with both nasal information. For example, one of our colleagues that knows a lot about breathing, when the people was inside the system and we were here watching all the time series, the signal, he knew when a person was about to fall asleep. No? He said, oh, look at the breathing, it started to be asymmetrical, and then we went, whoa, and you was, hello, how are you? Nothing. He was absolutely asleep. And so this breathing information is giving us a lot of information about also the brain state. So imagine we have now all the brain, all the activity coming from the brain, the activity coming from the heart, from the gut, and binasal information. So we have a lot of information to be analyzed. And now we will have the microbiome information. And everything has to be correlated. This is why we need physics, no, in this project, no, to analyze. What they have to do. So imagine that we have to take advantage of this possibility to run this experiment, and we tried to do as much as possible as the people were there. So people were in the system around more or less 1 hour and a half, because they have to be in resting state, doing nothing. Then they have to do different tasks for emotional regulation. Here is where we collaborate with psychologists to design all these tasks. And we asked people to remember positive, negative, and neutral things that happened to them, memories. So I remember when I was there, blah, 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 positive, negative, and neutral, to see what happened in the body at the same time. Then we asked people to think in positive, negative, and neutral situations that could happen but didn't happen. So what we wanted to see here is the difference between remember and imagination. What are the differences? What neuroscience literature says is that there is no much difference when we are remembering something than when we are imagining something. Which is also surprising. We wanted to see what is anticipation, what is happening when we are thinking in something that it didn't happen. Then we have awareness of readiness, meaning that the people is 10 minutes paying attention to the feelings of the breathing, okay? 10 minutes. Here I remember that we have people that never meditate, people that are novice that just started to meditate, and also we have expert meditators, no? Because we wanted to see what is the brain and body correlates of attention. What's happening with people that doesn't know to pay attention during 10 minutes and people that paying attention to the breathing during 10 minutes is absolutely nothing. Then we wanted to see other hypothesis is like slowing down the breathing increase attention. So during 5 or 10 minutes, I don't remember, people were slowing down the attention, the breathing. No? They observe the breathing and they have to decrease and decrease as much as they can. And then also they repeat this task and they are awareness of breathing, they pay attention to the breathing again to see the difference. And then finally we put a body scan, that means that pay attention how you feel your body. Because it's surprising, but because not all of us have the same perception, the same brain representation of our body. If we think in your feel your leg. In this moment, not everybody has the feeling of the head. This is proprioception. And proprioception is very, very related to decision making, for example. No? This is all this somatic marker by Antonio Damasio, was the hypothesis behind. So we have all this very ambitious experiment with many, many tasks that we have to analyze. And we just did something very before summer. Very preliminary results. We go to short.
How long was the whole process?
1.5 hours. 1.5 hours. This is why we were very worried about they fall asleep. No? Also in supine position. And inside the seal room that is, you listen nothing, you have was very easy.
Didn't you change the order of different...
Yeah, it was randomized.
Yeah.
Just to see. We have I know it was in Math Lab. We did just select randomly the order. Yeah. So we analyzed the data. We started for what we know best, or at least me, is how to analyze the brain activity. So we ran this source analysis. That means that we have the electrode, we are measuring the brain outside the brain because we are working in humans. We cannot measure neurons, but we have the magnetic brain activity from the scalp or close to the scalp because it's MEG. But we wanted to see where this signal comes from. This is source analysis. That means that I want to know the anatomy of the brain, where this information. We are using different atlas. In this case, we use the Harvard Atlas to have the reference where the information. This is all the source analysis algorithms for the inverse problem. And then we computed the spectral analysis. You know that in neuroscience, it's important to see if the neurons or brain areas are firing in gamma and alpha and beta and different brain rhythms. And then we compute the connectivity using phase looking value. At the preliminary results show that, for example, people that has how to control attention, that is expert meditators, has an increase in occipital alpha band. In this project, we collaborate with Professor Ole Jensen from Birmingham Institute, Birmingham University. You know, he's a very, very well-known expert in alpha band. one of the hypotheses is that we have an increase in alpha when we want to stop, when we want to reduce inner interference in our brain. So to pay attention to something, we need to avoid inner interference. So alpha, the role of alpha is not to relax the brain, is not to pay attention, is to help attention reducing distraction. Now what we expected, and was no surprise because previous literature already showed that in meditation we have an increase in alpha, and this is what we saw. It was interesting for us to see what are the characteristics that when we can increase our alpha activity more. When we are meditating every day or when we go to different retreats. No? And what we saw is that the number of retreats a person did, which means the intensive practice of meditation during collapse in few days, increase more alpha activity. This is more important. These parameters are important because consider that I'm working in a meditation institute and they want to design protocols to increase the benefits of meditation, and also because we want to do retreats and meditation in Mallorca, so these results were in favor of us. You have to do retreats in Mallorca to increase alpha activity. This is what we saw. Then we went to connectivity. What we saw also as expected is that the mechanism, the control of attention increased the connectivity in different areas because, as I told you, we have a spatial resolution. We know which node it belongs to different areas. We can know the cartography, and we see how the brain reorganizes, who is connected with who is increasing the connection, who is decreasing the connection, so the network. We have this network, and what we did until now is just to compute the network, pairwise connection. Then we perform a multiple comparison statistic, but the network is only to see who is connected with who. Sorry.
What are the connections in this network?
The brain areas. The brain areas. Okay. You mean?
No, like the connections in the
connectivity,
yeah.
the correlation between two areas.
Phase looking value.
Yes.
Okay.
We have the signals, we computed the phase, and we see how the phase between two signals are correlated.
Okay.
There are other ways, for example, coherence. We compute the spectrum of the signals, for example, Fourier, but if you want to have temporal information, you can compute the wavelet information. You have time, or frequency time representation, one signal and other signal, and then you compute the convolution, the correlation between the spectrum, and you see two signals, two brain areas are correlated if they have more or less similar spectrum in the same time, okay, correlated to the phase. And this is what we did.
Okay.
There are many different ways to compute the connectivity in the brain, but for MEG, what we better words, I will say, is coherence and phase looking value. And then you have a matrix. Imagine that here we have 76 areas, our region of interest, and we compute the matrix, we compute the network, and then you can do many things, topological. But the topological characterization that is more interesting because it's telling you about the architecture of what is happening or how they organize in different conditions is based on the analysis of this network. Until now, we just computed the connectivity in resting state, because as I told you, we have a lot of data that we have to start analyzing. Just last 2 weeks ago, I just finished cleaning data, segmenting everything, preparing this belong to this area. The processing, you know, is much more time consuming than the processing. No? And now the data is practically ready, and we have to start analyzing everything. And here is only brain. So we have, remember, we have the signals coming from the broad body that we have to add to this network. What I would like the most is to have a network where I have all these brain regions, the head, two nasal information, and the gut. And then imagine another network with the microbiome. And compare, I don't know, it would be fantastic for me to have this network. For example, we are thinking in applying machine learning methods, because this feature selection can give me information if imagine the feature selection is telling me, no, the gut is nothing to see here. It's not providing, it's not increasing your accuracy of classification, prediction, or whatever. Okay, so I will say maybe the gut is not interacting, but maybe it's telling you, yes, the gut is one of the features that I select, and these areas of the brain and hurt in that moment, whatever. So what I want to see is if they interact, how they do, and how is this complex network. No? But until now, what I do is only the brain activity. In alpha, in different spectra. Gamma, you know, is very important because it's very related to cognitive, high cognitive process. No, how brain responds very, very fast. And this is what I did. We are working. We need hands from people in complex system. As I told you, we know what we want to do, but we don't know how to do it. We have many data. This is most of the people working. This is the engineer, Ricardo Bruña, that is in the CTV. That is a fantastic engineer that they develop the system to interact everything with to put everything simultaneously in the computer and don't get crazy. No, the people who is helping us in the experiment. He's Gustavo Diaz is the director of this institute. Meditation. He is a physicist. And he's doing now the PhD in medicine school, and he has a master in artificial intelligence. No? And also he's a meditation teacher from since I don't know 20 years or so. So he's with the director. He's other physicist that is working with us. I am here. So we are many people, and now we have this hub. Very important hub in Madrid, and I want to expand the network. I have another hub in Mallorca to develop this project. And thank you very much. Bueno, 1 hour.
Questions or comments?
Did you find in all the bands more functional connectivity in experts than in novices?
Yeah, but not in delta. Not in delta. In alpha, mainly in alpha and gamma. In beta there was no differences, and in delta there was a decrease. Yeah.
How do you dissociate actually the role of the cardiovascular system? Because we are talking all the time about heart and respiration, but the truth is that it's actually one system. Yeah. I know that in cognition these two have been actually separated, but at the end of the day one is influencing each other.
Yeah, no, we want to see this influence, and this is why we will record it simultaneously. But for example, one question here is that we have this cardio-respiratory system, as you say, that the binasal information is what is giving more information, because it's not simultaneously correlated to the heart. This small assembly, this is very small, as you can imagine, no? This very small symmetry is the flexion, the inflection, no? The point here. But this is very, for example, in fMRI, we measure together. No? Yeah, and also the mechanoreceptors. We know the movement. We have information about the movement of the body.
But then it's true that even though you have the same sampling rate in the MEG, then the expression of each organ is actually different, because where the heart rate and the breathing have different beats per minute. No?
Yeah, so exactly. And also the gut. The gut is a very slow frequency, 0.05. This is why I told you we cannot compute or analyze this data with standard methods. I cannot compute that simple coherence, because I can compute cross-frequency coherence between ultra slow frequency and standard in brain area. No, and this is what Talon Baudry did. No, but imagine, no. You are breathing, I don't know, 10 times per minute, and your brain is 10 times per second. No? You have a 60 phase here. This is why, for example, now we are analyzing with ensemble methods, no? That is based on artificial intelligence and the boost algorithms to prediction, because it's here we separate features It's not a direct comparison, a coherence. But it was the first question we have.
Follow-up. And then how do you compute, because I guess that you are using the breathing belt and also the ECG to measure when actually the information is...
The ECG?
The ECG and the gastro and the breathing belt and so forth. I guess that you are measuring this and you are estimating that they have some sort of influence in the brain, but it's also true that, for instance, the information of the heart from the bioreceptors takes maybe 300
Exactly, the
milliseconds or so.
mechanoreceptor, exactly. But this is important where this information, the head above potentials, go to the brain. As you say, for example, this baroreceptor and mechanoreceptors that we have in the breast has a representation in the brain, but this representation is more in the somatosensory areas, but not in the insula.
But do you account for the delay between one, for instance, the organ pulsating and the information
Exactly.
arriving?
But we estimate the delay.
Okay.
For example, we don't observe the delay. And using, for example, independent components analysis, that we see how in one signal, what is the contribution of the different signals of the system, we can compute the delay there, no? And for example, in insula, there is no delay, but was expected. There was no delay because it's the area that look at the body, what is happening. But for example, with frontal area, there is a delay. And there is a delay around 150 milliseconds. No? This is why it's not direct. No, it's a not direct connection. There is a loop, there is a network there. No? And this is why this T wave, no, we have our head emit a pulse and then repolarize. No? And this is the T wave. The T wave is happening around 200 milliseconds after the head pulse. And in this area, in this time window, the T wave is where we found more correlation. Because, as you say, we have a delay. And this delay is evidencing that there is a neural mechanism interpreting the signal of the heart.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I understand that you will have this multi-layer binary networks, right?
Yeah. I like very much this multi-layer.
But is there a way to put a weight in these links?
A weight?
Instead of just present and absence of interaction between two nodes? Like frequency of interaction?
It's very interesting. I didn't think. Yeah, you are very right. That's a very good idea. What we want to have is a multi-layer, as you say, network. But we suppose that there is all the time, no? Yeah, this is very interesting. This is a very, very nice question. Thank you. Because one of the works, for example, showing the interaction between the heart and the brain, said that this interaction is intermittent. There was a very famous paper by Embodied group in Paris, published in Nature Neuroscience, where people were in the system, no? Measuring the brain activity and also the heart. And they put some pulse in the screen, no? And they have to know, they have to press a button when they are conscious that they saw the pulse, no? And in this case, what they wanted to see is the attentional blinking paradigms. We already know that most of the pulse are missing for us. We are not conscious about them. Why? We are conscious about one pulses and not another, no? And what they saw is that when there is a connection, there is a coherence, a synchrony between the heart and the brain, is when we saw, or we are conscious that we saw and we press. But sometimes the brain is not reacting to the heart. The heart above potentials are zero. So this connection is intermittent. And what they say is when they are disconnected, when there is not this synchrony between them, we lost this information. So maybe heart is the gate of perception, is what they say. No, this is the hypothesis of Embodied. So and they saw that it's intermittent. We don't know why. One of the questions, one of the hypotheses is that we have this resting state that we do nothing. This brain, the full network activity, the brain is doing many times, and sometimes the brain is in their activity and don't respond to the heart. So very nice. Thank you. Very interesting.
have a very general question. I mean, you have now a lot of data that you want to analyze, but it was not clear to me to what extent you are trying to find interactions among different systems, blindly looking at the data, or you have some a priori assumptions of what type of interactions you want to find, and then you try to find them.
But thank you. No, we have some hypotheses before, based on this recent literature. One hypothesis is, for example, that attention, how the attention is correlated to brain activity. So what we expected to have is less brain activity, less synchrony between brain and heart in meditators. Why? Because if attention is linked to this synchrony, we expected to have more synchrony there. The gut, for example, we expected that there was a connection from gut to the brain. Is the hypothesis. There is one paper showing evidences that the information comes first from the gut and then to the brain. This is what we wanted to see. Also the direction. We expected to have direction from gut to the brain. And breathing, we expected to have an increase in cognition after slowing down the breathing. No? So we have more results. But we want to start, or we are starting pairwise. Heart with the brain, breathing with the brain, gut with the brain. But then finally to develop a complex model. But I think we will start in these very short steps.
Just to go a step forward in this direction, both breathing and heartbeat is regulated by the brainstem.
Brainstem, locus coeruleus.
So maybe another way to put this question is to start from a physiological model of how these different parts of the body are related, how the activity of brainstem may regulate both modulate the activity of encephalus, and also the heartbeat or the breathing, to see how what are these activities synchronized. I don't know if there is a way to measure brainstem activity.
No, with MEG we cannot measure locus coeruleus. What we wanted to see is, in this paper I showed you, published in Science, they showed that there is a connection from locus coeruleus preboscinger complex to ventromedial prefrontal cortex via insula. This is what we can see with MEG. So, of course, we cannot measure locus coeruleus. This experiment, this paper in Science is done in animals, because in humans it's very difficult to measure this complex.
I think that we have such an enormous amount of data, of recordings, in some way or another, you will find patterns of connectivity, but that may be difficult to decipher, to explain, unless you have a model of the organization of the different connections.
Yeah, for example, now there are more evidences about anatomical connections, and this is what we will use. For example, all these nervous vagus nervus coming to the brain, and we know what are the afferents of the vagus coming in the brain, and we will use this topology done mainly in animals. No? And then we see in the network, we know that the information, the afferent information can come here and then how they spread. And this is what we want, that the region of interest that we will use. For example, in these areas, the region of interest that we selected are according to the literature. In the brain with MEG, we cannot go to deeper sources, but we can have information around 150 brain areas. We selected only 76, the areas that we found in literature. Of course, it's not, we can measure everything with everything, and maybe it's more interesting because it's giving us more information, but we start from the little that we already know. Yeah, of course. This project was developed to run this ambitious experiment and to have data for 5 years more or less, because we don't want to run more experiments, and also we cannot for economical and time reasons. No? This is why we collapse everything with emotional regulation, with attention, with proprioception. No? It's the thesis of different people.
Okay, well, no more question. Thanks again.